I'm saving the family, Dad, my son lied, his eyes cold as he watched the nurse stick a needle in my neck. He had me declared insane and thrown into a concrete cell just to sell the company I built with my bare hands. He thought he had buried me alive. You forgot that I'm a builder, and I know exactly where the cracks are in every wall. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It keeps the fight alive. It all started on a rainy Tuesday. They say you never really know a man until you share an inheritance with him, until you watch his eyes tally the numbers of a life that hasn't even finished ending. I would argue you never really know him until you tell him no, until you place a concrete barrier in front of his desires and watch to see if he climbs it or if he tries to blow it up. My name is Robert Sterling. For 45 years I have been a builder. I don't mean that in the abstract, white-collar sense of the word. I am not a man of spreadsheets and handshakes, though I have mastered both out of necessity. I mean I have calluses on my hands that feel like hardened leather, ridges of dead skin formed by cold steel rebar, and the unforgiving vibration of jackhammers. I have dust in my lungs, silica and limestone that makes my breath catch when the weather turns cold. I know how things stand. I know how they fall. I built Sterling infrastructure from the ground up. It started with a single rusted pickup truck that smelled of gasoline and wet dog, and a loan I could barely afford to service. Over 4 decades, I turned that debt into the largest logistics construction firm in the state. I believed in the tangible, things you could touch, steel that sang when you struck it, stone that held the heat of the sun, glass that separated the chaos from the calm, things that didn't lie. Structural engineering is a discipline of honesty. If a beam is weak, the building falls. There is no negotiating with physics. Gravity is the only honest judge in this world. It cannot be bribed, it cannot be charmed, and it never ever blinks. I thought I had built a family on the same principles. I thought blood was like rebar, a hidden strength that held everything together when the load got too heavy. Strong foundations, honest lines. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday in late November. The atmosphere outside my study was biblical. The rain wasn't just falling, it was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seeking a way in, it was a relentless gray sheet of water that blurred the city lights below into weeping streaks of neon. It matched the feeling in my gut, a cold, heavy stone that had been sitting there since I opened the audit file 3 hours ago. I sat behind my mahogany desk. My late wife, Martha, had bought it for me for our 25th anniversary. Solid wood, for a solid man, she had said, tracing the grain with her finger. It felt solid under my elbows now, but I felt brittle. I felt like old mortar ready to crumble at the slightest tremor. Across from me sat Jason. My son, Jason, was 34 years old, but in this light the shadows carved into his face made him look younger, softer. He was wearing a navy suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. Italian wool silk lining, the kind of suit that cost more than the down payment on my first house. He was handsome, polished, and he smelled of sandalwood and expensive whiskey. He looked like success, but the details told a different story. He was sweating. The room was climate-controlled to a perfect 68 degrees, yet a small, treacherous bead of perspiration rolled down his temple, disappearing into his crisp white collar. He wiped it away quickly with the back of his hand, a jerky, erratic motion, hoping I wouldn't notice. I saw it. I saw everything. Inspecting for hairline fractures was my job. "Dad, you're not listening to me," Jason said. His voice pitched up high, cracking slightly on the vowels. It always did that when he felt cornered. It was the same tone he used when he was 10 and broke the neighbor's window, like a child caught with his hand in the jar, trying to talk his way out of a spanking. "The Omni Group offer is a lifeline," he insisted, leaning forward, his manicured hands gripping the edge of my desk. "They're offering a 40% premium on the stock." 40%, Dad. If we don't sell now, we're going to be swallowed up by the competition. The market is shifting. We're dinosaurs. I kept my face like stone. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just let his words hit me and slide off. "We are the competition, Jason," I said. My voice was level, calm, the voice of a man who knows the load rating of the floor he stands on. I looked down at the quarterly reports spread out before me. To anyone else, they were just columns of numbers. To me, they were the vital signs of the beast I had raised. "The numbers are black and strong," I continued. tracing a line on the paper. The company is healthy. Our debt is the lowest it's been in a decade. We have the harbor contract. We have the bridge retrofit. We aren't dinosaurs, son. We are the bedrock. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air like heavy smoke. I watched his eyes dart around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an argument. The only thing that isn't healthy, I said softly. I looked up, locking eyes with him. Is your personal liquidity. Jason flinched. It was a tiny movement. A microspasm, just a twitch of his left eye and a tightening of his jaw muscle. But for a father who had watched him grow from a boy who cried over scraped knees to a man who thought he could rule the world, it was a scream. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. He looked away, staring at the rain lashing the glass, unable to meet the weight of my gaze. Lies. He always looked left when he lied. It was his tell. It had been his tell since he was 6 years old. I'm talking about the $5 million you borrowed from the employee pension fund. I said. I didn't shout. Shouting is for men who have no control, for men who are terrified. I wasn't terrified. I was devastated. I pulled a red folder from the bottom of the stack on my desk. The color seemed violent against the dark wood. I placed it in the center of the mahogany table, sliding it slowly toward him. I'm talking about the gambling debts in Vegas, Jason. The Bellagio. The win. I'm talking about the leverage you've put on your own shares to cover the interest. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking. You didn't just borrow money. You mortgaged your integrity. Jason's face went pale. All the flushed arrogance drained out of him, leaving him looking gray and sickly. He stared at the red folder as if it were a bomb. Dad, I can explain, he stammered, his hands fluttering in the air. It was an investment, a sure thing. It went south. I can fix it. I just need the merger bonus. That covers everything. No one has to know. You stole from the workers, I said, my voice hardening into iron. Men who have poured concrete in freezing rain. Women who manage our logistics on night shifts. You stole their future to pay for your volatility. I stood up. My knees popped. A sharp reminder of my age. But I stood tall. I felt a heavy ache in my chest. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the sensation of a load-bearing wall finally giving way. It was heartbreak. I'm freezing your accounts tomorrow morning, I told him. The words tasted like ash. And I'm calling the board. You're stepping down. Effective immediately. Jason stared at me. The silence stretched, thin, and taut as a wire ready to snap. Then the expression on his face changed. The fear in his eyes vanished, dissolving into something opaque. It was replaced by something else. Something cold. Something reptilian. It was a look I had seen on negotiation tables with sharks, but never on the face of my own son. You can't do that, he whispered. I'm the CEO in waiting. The market expects it. It would destroy the stock price. It would ruin the legacy. It's better than prison, I said. I turned my back on him and walked to the window. The reflection in the dark glass showed an old man, weary and bent, and a desperate young one behind him. I'm giving you a chance to resign with dignity, son. To say it's for health reasons. To seek treatment. Don't make me call the police. Don't make me put my own son in handcuffs. Jason looked down at his hands. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Then he looked up. His eyes were wet. For a second, I thought he was going to cry. I thought I saw the boy again, the one who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. I'm sorry, Dad, he said softly. My heart softened. Just a fraction. It was a structural weakness, I knew, but he was still my boy. My blood. I know, son, I said, turning back to face him. We'll get through this. I have money, personal money. We'll pay it back. We'll get you help. No, he said. The word was flat, devoid of emotion. He reached into his pocket. I'm sorry it has to be this way. He pulled out his phone. He didn't dial. He didn't scroll. He typed a single message. Tap. Send. The sound of him locking the screen. Click. Echoed in the quiet room like the hammer of a gun falling on an empty chamber. What are you doing? I asked. A prickle of unease ran up my spine. The instinct that tells you the scaffolding is about to give way. Before he could answer, the heavy oak doors of my study burst open. I hadn't heard a car approach on the gravel driveway. I hadn't heard the doorbell ring. I hadn't heard the housekeeper. 2 men marched in. They were not police. They were dressed in white clinical uniforms, starched and pristine, but they moved with the heavy, predatory aggression of bouncers at a cheap bar. They brought with them the smell of antiseptic and cold winter air. The taller one carried a heavy black medical bag. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on me with zero recognition, zero empathy. "Mr. Sterling," the taller one said. His voice was bored. "Practiced. Please remain calm. We are here to help." "Who are you?" I demanded. My adrenaline spiked. I came around the desk, placing myself between them and my son. The protective instinct was still there, even after everything. "Get out of my house." "Who let you in?" "Dad, please," Jason said. He stepped back, retreating behind the safety of the heavy leather armchair. He wouldn't look at me. "Don't fight them," Jason said, his voice taking on a trembling, theatrical quality. "It's for your own good. You've been confused lately. You haven't been yourself." I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Confused?" I looked at my son, trying to find the joke. "I am perfectly lucid. I just audited a 10-year financial trail in 3 hours." Jason looked at the men. He put on a mask of deep, pained concern. It was a performance, a script he had rehearsed. "He's aggressive," Jason told them, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "He threatened to burn the house down tonight. He's paranoid. He thinks I'm stealing from him. He thinks everyone is stealing from him. I am paranoid because you are stealing from me," I shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the red folder. "See?" Jason said to the orderlies. He pointed at me, his own fingers shaking with feigned terror. "Delusions. Persecution. Complex. It's getting worse." The men moved fast. I was 68 years old. My joints ached when it rained. But I was fit. I had spent a lifetime lifting, climbing, and building. I swung a fist at the tall one. As he reached for me, crack! I connected with his jaw. It felt solid. It felt good. For a split second, I felt like I was back on a job site in the 80s, breaking up a brawl between iron workers. But the second one was behind me. I hadn't accounted for the flank. He wrapped an arm around my neck. It was a chokehold, professional and tight, thick muscle against my windpipe. I struggled, kicking out. My foot caught a Tiffany lamp on the side table. It crashed to the floor, glass shattering, the bulb popping, a sound like a gunshot in the small room. The darkness encroached as the lamp died. "Hold him," the tall man grunted. He wiped a smear of blood from his lip, his eyes narrowing in annoyance. He unzipped a black bag. He had pulled a syringe from a protective case. The needle glinted in the light of the fire in the hearth. "Jason," I gasped. My vision was tunneling. The lack of oxygen was making the room spin. Black spots danced in my eyes like gnats. "Don't do this. You're my son. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk." Jason turned his back to me. He didn't look. He couldn't look. He was a coward who could sign a death warrant, but couldn't watch the execution. He walked over to my desk and picked up the red folder. The evidence. The truth. "I'm saving the family, Dad," he said. His voice was flat. "Dead. The merger is the only way. You're just in the way. You're stuck in the past." I felt the prick of the needle in my neck. Sharp, invasive, cold fire spread through my veins. It was instantaneous. My knees buckled. The arm around my throat loosened as I went limp. The floor rushed up to meet me, the Persian rug smelling of dust and age. The last thing I saw through the haze of the drug was Jason feeding the papers from the red folder into the heavy-duty shredder by my desk. Whirr! The mechanical gnashing of the machine filled the room. It was the sound of my life's work, my proof, my reality, being turned into confetti. The sound of the paper tearing was the last thing I heard before the darkness took me completely. I thought I had built a legacy. I thought I had built a fortress. I had built a cave, and my son had just locked the door. I woke up to the smell of aggressive sterility. It was a cocktail of industrial bleach, floor wax, and the faint, copper tang of stale air that has been recycled too many times. It was the smell of a place where people go to be filed away. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt heavy, glued shut by sleep and chemistry. When I finally forced them open, the world was a blur of aggressive white. White acoustic tile ceiling, stained with a single brown water spot in the corner. A roof leak, I noted instinctively. Floor flashing installation. White cinder block walls. A heavy steel door with a small reinforced wireglass window at eye level. I was lying on a twin bed. The frame was tubular steel, bolted directly into the concrete subfloor. There were no sharp edges. No loose screws. I looked down at myself. My body, usually clad in worsted wool and starched cotton, was draped in a shapeless gray scrub suit. The fabric was coarse, cheap cotton poly blend that felt like sandpaper against my skin. My watch was gone, my vintage Omega, the one I bought the day I landed the skyscraper contract in '98, was gone. My wedding ring was gone. I felt a sudden, terrifying nakedness. Without my tools, without my symbols, was I still Robert Sterling, or was I just the biology that remained? I tried to sit up, my head pounded. It wasn't a headache, it was a seismic event. A chemical hangover that throbbed in time with my pulse. They had sedated me heavily. "Hello?" I croaked. My voice was a rusted hinge. My throat was dry as dust. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My equilibrium was shot. The floor seemed to tilt. I stumbled toward the door, my bare feet slapping against the cold linoleum. I pressed my face to the small window. A long hallway stretched out in both directions. Linoleum floors polished to a mirror shine, reflected the harsh hum of fluorescent tube lights. At the far end, behind a wall of plexiglass, sat a nurse's station. This wasn't a hospital. Hospitals have a chaotic energy. Life, death, urgency. This place was silent. It was a storage facility for human inventory. A face appeared at the window, startling me. It was a nurse. She was a thick-set woman with hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. Her face was hard, etched with the indifference of someone who has seen everything and felt nothing. Her name tag read Miller. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She looked at her clipboard, then keyed a radio clip to her shoulder. "Subject in 4B is awake," she said. Her voice was flat. "Log it. They wrote 800 hours. "I want a lawyer," I said. I leaned against the door, my legs trembling from the aftershocks of the sedative. "I want a phone. I am being held against my will." "You are under an emergency psychiatric hold," she said through the glass. Her voice was muffled but chillingly clear. "Section 550, extended by private petition." "That's impossible," I said. "I haven't been charged with anything." "Court ordered," she droned, reciting a script she had used 1,000 times. "Your son, Jason Sterling, has been granted temporary guardianship due to your acute cognitive decline and violent outbursts." "I am not incapacitated," I yelled. I pounded the glass with the heel of my hand. The reinforced pain didn't even vibrate. "I am a CEO. I employ 3,000 people. I demand to speak to the director. Dr. Vance will see you during rounds," she said dismissively. She tapped the glass with her pen, like one might tap a fish tank to startle a goldfish. "Calm down, Mr. Sterling. Agitation extends the hold." She turned and walked away. Her rubber soles squeaked on the polished floor. Squeak, squeak. The sound of authority walking away. I slid down the door until I hit the floor. The cold seeped into my hamstrings. I put my head in my hands. The chemical fog in my brain was trying to suffocate me, but I fought it. "Think, Robert. Think. Robert. Think." Jason had planned this. The ambush. The doctors. He must have been planning it for months. You don't get a guardianship order overnight. He had been building a case, documenting my outburst, perhaps even drugging my coffee at the office to make me seem erratic. A temporary guardianship would give him power of attorney. He would control the voting shares. He would sign the Omni Group deal, cash out the 40% premium, and leave me to rot in here. By the time I got out, if I ever got out, Sterling Infrastructure would be gutted, sold off for parts, and the pension fund theft would be buried under layers of corporate acquisition paperwork. I checked my pockets again. Empty, just lint. I was a man who commanded the skyline of the city, and now I couldn't even command the door to my own room. The first week was a lesson in humility that I had never wanted to learn. A man who had shouted at foremen and negotiated with senators was now forced to ask permission to use the bathroom. I was forced to eat tasteless, lukewarm oatmeal that congealed on the spoon. I was forced to join the line at the medication window, opening my mouth like a baby bird while Nurse Miller checked under my tongue. But I was a builder, and builders do not look at the paint. They look at the structure. We look for the load path. We look for the stress fractures. Every building has a flaw. Every system has a leak. Nature hates a vacuum, and it hates perfection. I started cheeking the pills. It was a dangerous game. The pills were blue ovals, heavy sedatives, likely antipsychotics meant to turn my brain into slush. I'd hide them under my tongue, wedging them deep against the gum line. I'd drink the water, swallow loudly to show my Adam's apple moving, and smile at the nurse. "Good boy," Miller would say with zero warmth. When she turned away, I would walk calmly to the communal bathroom, spit the dissolving bitterness into the toilet, and flush. It was risky. If they caught me, they'd switch to injections, and once the needle goes in, you have no choice. But I needed my mind sharp. I needed to feel the anger. The anger was the only fuel I had left. I observed the routine. I built a blueprint of the facility in my mind. 0700, shift change. The night crew leaves tired. The morning crew arrives groggy. 0800, breakfast. 1000, group therapy, mandatory. A room full of broken souls talking about their mothers, while a bored intern took notes. Christard, lunch. I watched the staff. Most were indifferent. They were just punching a clock, waiting for the weekend. They didn't care if we were crazy or not, as long as we were quiet. Some were cruel. Nurse Miller enjoyed the power. She liked to make us wait for water. She liked to threaten us with quiet time in the padded isolation rooms if we didn't eat our peas. But the ruder Dr. Vance was the key. I saw him through the chain-link fence of the exercise courtyard. He didn't come into the ward often. He preferred his office in the administrative wing. He drove a brand-new Porsche 911 Turbo, slate gray, red brake calipers. He parked it in the reserved spot right out front under the floodlight. He wore Italian suits, Canali, maybe Zegna, that cost $3,000 easy. He wore a gold watch that glinted in the sun. He was a man who liked money, and Jason had plenty of my money to give him. This wasn't a hospital. It was a transaction. One afternoon in the courtyard, I sat on a concrete bench. The air was crisp, hinting at snow. A shadow fell over me. I looked up. A large man stood there. He was huge, built like a linebacker or a union pile driver operator. His hands were the size of shovels, but his face was surprisingly gentle. Round, soft features that seemed at odds with his bulk. "You're not crazy," the man whispered. I looked at him, startled. "Excuse me? You don't have the look," he said. He sat down next to me. The concrete bench groaned under his weight. The eyes, they focus too well. You track movement. The crazies, they look through you, or they look at things that aren't there. You look at the fence. I'm not, I admitted. I kept my voice low. "My son put me here." "Careful," the man said. He glanced at the guard standing by the heavy steel door, smoking cigarettes and laughing at a video on a phone. "If you act too sane, they punish you. It threatens them. You gotta act a little broken. Shuffle your feet. Stare at the floor, or they'll break you for real." "Who are you?" I asked. "They call me Tiny," he grinned. A tooth was chipped in the front. Tiny reached into the pocket of his oversized scrubs. He pulled out a small, smashed chocolate bar. It was warm and misshapen. "Eat," he whispered, pressing it into my hand. "You need the sugar. The oatmeal here is sawdust. Your brain needs fuel." It was a small act of kindness, but in a place stripped of humanity, it felt like a miracle. It felt like communion. "Why are you here, Tiny?" I asked, breaking the chocolate and letting the sweetness coat my tongue. "I saw something I shouldn't have," he said. His smile faded, replaced by a deep, melancholy shadow. "At the docks, I worked cargo. Union steward. I saw crates that weren't on the manifest. People didn't like that I saw them." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. We were both inconveniences to powerful men. We were debris to be swept away. How long have you been here? I asked. 2 years, Tiny said. My heart sank. 2 years. 2 years of oatmeal and white walls. Don't worry, Tiny said, reading my face. You got fight in you. I can see it. You're a builder, right? I see you tapping the walls.
How did you know?
You look at the walls, he said, not like a prisoner looking for a window, like a mechanic looking at an engine. You're looking for the beams. He was right. I was mapping the place. I was finding the skeleton under the skin, the fire system, I whispered, leaning closer to him. It's halon gas. I saw the nozzles in the ceiling. Tiny nodded. Halon sucks the oxygen out. For the server room in the east wing. Keeps the computers safe from water damage. If it triggers, I said, my mind racing through the International Building Code, the doors have to open. It's mandatory safety code. The facility must vent to prevent asphyxiation in the adjacent corridors. Tiny smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You are dangerous, Mr. Sterling. Day 10. I was sitting in the examination room waiting for Dr. Vance. I had a plan. I was going to confront him. I was going to offer him double what Jason was paying. Triple. I would sign over a property. Anything. I was rehearsing my pitch when the door opened. But Vance didn't walk in. A young woman walked in. She was in her early 30s. She wore a white coat that seemed too big for her shoulders. The sleeves rolled up. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. But her face was kind, tired, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. But kind. She was holding my chart, frowning at the notes. She didn't look at me at first. She was reading the file, shaking her head slightly. Mr. Sterling, she said. Her voice was professional, exhausted. I'm Dr. Emily Grant. I'm covering for Dr. Vance today. He's unavailable at a charity golf tournament. Of course he was, spending his bribe money. I froze. The name hit me like a physical blow. Emily Grant. I looked at her. Isla looked at her. Behind the thick glasses. Behind the fatigue of a resident doing double shifts. I saw a girl in the front row of a lecture hall. A girl who took notes furiously. A girl who wore thrift store sweaters and had a hunger in her eyes. Emily? I whispered. She stopped reading. She looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Then she saw me. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. She squinted, leaning forward.
Mr. Sterling? She asked.
Her voice trembled. It wasn't the voice of a doctor anymore. Professor Sterling, I corrected gently. Introduction to Structural Integrity. Fall semester, 2012. You sat in the front row. You always asked about tensile strength. She dropped the clipboard on the desk. Clatter. She stepped back, instinctively checking the camera in the corner of the room. A red light blinked slowly. Oh my God, she breathed. She put a hand to her mouth. I saw the name on the intake. She whispered, rushing over to me, but keeping a professional distance for the camera's sake. But I thought it was a coincidence. The chart says. It says you have advanced dementia. Violent psychopathy. It says you don't know who you are. Lies. I said, all lies. I stood up slowly, showing my hands were empty. Emily, look at me. Listen to my syntax. Do I sound demented? She studied me. She was a scientist. She observed. She saw the clarity. She saw the man who had lectured her on load-bearing walls and the ethics of construction. She saw the man who had anonymously paid her medical school tuition when her father, a welder on one of my sites, died of a heart attack. I never told her it was me. I didn't want the gratitude. I just wanted to balance the scales. But she was smart. She had guessed. She had written me a letter once. To my benefactor. I still had it in my safe at home. You paid for my school, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. After my dad died, the scholarship, it saved me. I did, I said, because you were smart, and because we take care of our own. Your father was a good man. He laid the steel for the West Side suspension bridge. I owed him. She wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. She glanced at the door. Why are you here? Jason, I said. He's selling the company. He bribed Vance. Emily, I'm trapped. I can't make calls. I can't leave. They're drugging me. I leaned in closer. dropping my voice to a murmur. On Friday, 2 days from now, he's signing the deal that will destroy everything I built, everything your father helped build. I can't discharge you, she said, wringing her hands until the knuckles turned white. Vance has the override codes. If I try, he'll fire me. He'll ruin my license. He'll have you moved to a state facility within the hour. I don't want a discharge, I said. I don't need a lawyer. I need a weapon. A weapon? She looked terrified. She took a step back. Information, I said quickly. Jason thinks he destroyed the files. He shredded the folder in my office. I smiled. A grim, hard smile. The smile of a man who knows where the bodies are buried. But he forgot who I am. I'm an architect. I believe in redundancy. I believe in backups. There are copies. Not copies, I said. The originals. The forensic audit. The bank transfers. The proof that he's been embezzling for years. The proof that sends him to federal prison. Where are they? Emily asked. My old fishing cabin, I said. Lake Clearwater. 2 hours north. Under the floorboards of the tackle shed. It's dusty, full of spiders. It smells of gasoline. Jason hates nature, I added. He hates getting his hands dirty. He hasn't been there in 20 years. It's the only place he wouldn't look. Okay, Emily said. Her voice found a little strength. I can go get them. Tonight? I'll drive up? No, I said. That's not enough. I shook my head violently. Even if you get them, who will you give them to? The police take weeks. Jason has lawyers who charge $1,000 an hour. By the time they verify the documents, the deal will be signed. The company will be gone. Then what do? We need to crash the signing. I said, I need to be there. In person. I need to look the board in the eye. That's impossible, she said. The security here is military grade. The doors are magnetic. There are guards at every exit. Every building has a flaw, I reminded her. I've been watching the fire suppression system in the East Wing, the Howland system. If the sensors detect smoke in the server room, it triggers a total lockdown of the internal wings to contain the fire. I explained, my voice steady. But, I continued, it automatically unlocks the exterior emergency exits for ventilation. It's a code requirement to prevent the vacuum from imploding the windows. Emily stared at me. She understood. She remembered the lectures. You want me to set a fire? No, I said. I want you to burn some popcorn. Popcorn? In the staff microwave, I said. In the break room right next to the server farm. Burn it. Leave it in for 10 minutes. Make it smoke. The particulate sensors are sensitive. They'll pick it up. It was crazy. It was desperate. It was the plan of a madman. But it was the only shot I had. As Emily left the room, clutching my chart like a shield, Nurse Miller stopped her in the hallway. I watched through the crack in the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. You were in there a long time, Doctor, Miller said. Her eyes narrowed, scanning Emily's flushed face. He was confused, Emily lied smoothly. Her voice didn't waver. I had to reorient him. He thought he was teaching a class. Miller paused. She looked at the door, then back at Emily. She sniffed the air as if she could smell the conspiracy. Vance doesn't like us spending too much time with the VIPs. It encourages them. I'll keep that in mind, Emily said. She walked away. Her stride was purposeful. But as she turned the corner, I saw her hands shaking. It was close. Too close. The concrete tomb was starting to crack. Thursday night, the night before the signing, I lay in my bed, rigid as a corpse, staring at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. The facility was quiet, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a dam holding back too much water. I was dressed in my scrubs, my feet already in the cheap foam slippers they provided. I hadn't slept. I couldn't afford to drift off and let the fog of exhaustion dull my reflexes. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Thump, thump, thump. It was an arrhythmia of pure adrenaline. I had told Tiny earlier that day, during a whispered exchange by the water cooler, to stay in his room, to put a pillow over his head. Tonight, he had asked, his eyes wide. Tonight, I said, stay safe, Tiny. I checked the position of the moon through the wire mesh window. It was obscured by heavy clouds. A storm was brewing outside. Good. Chaos. loves company. I thought about Martha. I thought about the day we poured the foundation for our first house. We had thrown pennies into the wet concrete for luck. So we're always rich, she had laughed. I wasn't rich now. I was a pauper in a gray jumpsuit, waiting for a young doctor to risk her entire life for a man she hadn't seen in a decade. At 020 a.m., the world broke open. It didn't start with a siren. It started with a sound I knew well from industrial sites, the thrum of high-velocity ventilation fans kicking into overdrive. Then came the alarm, not the rhythmic, piercing beep of a fire alarm. It was a solid, low-frequency hum that vibrated in the teeth. The chemical suppression warning, whoosh, the sound of air displacement. Then the heavy mechanical clunk I'd been praying for. The magnetic locks on the exterior doors disengaging. A fail-safe protocol designed by engineers who prioritized human life over containment. I moved. I didn't hesitate. Hesitation is structural failure. I slipped out of my room. Emily had left the deadbolt disengaged during her final rounds. A sleight of hand that would cost her everything if discovered. I ran down the dark hallway, keeping low, my shoulder brushing the cold wall. The scene at the nurse's station was pandemonium. Red strobes were flashing, turning the white walls into a pulsing nightmare. The staff were running toward the east wing, shouting codes. I didn't understand. I could smell it now. Not smoke. Exactly. But the acrid, thick stench of burnt carbon, burnt popcorn. It smelled like a movie theater burning down. Fire in the break room. Someone shouted, their voice cracking with panic. Sensors are tripping in the server farm. Vent the wing. Get the masks. I used their confusion as my cover. I was a shadow in the red-strobed chaos. I reached the east exit, a heavy steel fire door that had been an immovable object for 10 days. I pushed the panic bar. It gave way with a smooth, hydraulic hiss. The door swung open. Cold, wet night air hit my face like a physical slap. It shocked my lungs. It tasted of ozone and rain and wet asphalt. It tasted like freedom. I ran. I scrambled across the manicured lawn. The wet grass soaked my foam slippers instantly, chilling my feet. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt the burn in my legs. I was 68, and my knees screamed in protest. But I forced them to pump. Left foot, right foot. Breathe. I headed toward the employee parking lot, aiming for the cluster of shadows beneath the oak trees. A small, battered Honda Civic was idling in the dark corner, its headlights off. Vapor puffed from its exhaust pipe. I wrenched the passenger door open and threw myself inside. Emily was behind the wheel. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were translucent. She was white as a sheet, trembling violently. She looked at me, her eyes wide with the reality of what she had just done. "Did anyone see you?" she asked. Her voice was a high, thin wire. I looked back at the facility. The red lights were pulsing against the building's facade. Shadows were moving in the window. "No," I gasped, clutching my chest. "Drive. Just drive." She stomped on the gas. The little car lurched forward, tires spinning on the wet pavement before finding traction. We sped out of the complex, blowing past the unmanned gatehouse. Emily kept checking the rearview mirror every 2 seconds. "We have to go to the cabin," I said, my breathing slowly returning to a rhythm. "It's 2 hours north, past the reservoir. We have a problem," Emily said. Her voice was tight. She reached into the center console and handed me her phone. The screen was cracked. I looked at the glowing display. A news alert from the Financial Times. Breaking. Sterling Infrastructure merger moved up. Emergency board meeting and signing set for 9 a.m. Friday. My stomach dropped. "He moved it up," I muttered. "He's scared. He knows I'm a loose end. He wants the ink dry before the weekend." I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. 02:15 a.m. "We can make it," I said, doing the math. 2 hours to the cabin. 30 minutes to find the box. 2 hours back. That gets us to the city by 7:00 a.m. We have a buffer. We hit the highway. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the road into a slick black ribbon. Emily drove fast, faster than she was comfortable with. The lines on the road blurred into a single streak. The windshield wipers slapped a frantic rhythm. Thwack hiss. Thwack hiss. I stared out the window at the passing darkness. My mind was racing, replaying the last 30 years. I thought about Jason, the boy I taught to fish on the dock of that cabin. I remembered his small hands, struggling with the line, his frustration, his delight when he finally caught a perch. When did that boy die? When did he stop being my son and start being a stranger who viewed me as an asset to be liquidated? Suddenly, brake lights flared ahead, a sea of red in the darkness. Blue and red strobe lights flashed in the distance, bouncing off the wet trees. "Oh, God!" Emily gasped. She tapped the brakes. Police. It was a roadblock, a DUI checkpoint. Or maybe they were already looking for me. "If they run your ID," Emily said, her voice rising in panic. "Or, if they see you, you're wearing prison scrubs, Robert." I looked at the road ahead. The queue of cars was long. Officers were shining flashlights into cabins. I looked to the right. A dark, muddy track disappeared into the woods. A chain-link gate was hanging open. "Turn off here," I said. I pointed to darkness. "That's a ditch," Emily cried. "This is a Honda, not a truck. It's a service lane for the high-tension power lines," I said. "I built the access road in '98 when we laid the grid for the North County. It's gravel under the mud. Trust me." "Robert, turn," I commanded. "Now!" She swerved. The Honda bounced off the asphalt and onto the gravel track. Crunch. Rocks pinged against the undercarriage like bullets. The car shook violently, the suspension bottoming out. We drove parallel to the highway, separated by a thick line of panes. Above us, the massive steel pylons of the power lines buzzed in the rain, a menacing electric hum. We passed the checkpoint from the safety of the trees. Through the gaps in the foliage, I saw the cops leaning into windows, flashlights beaming. I saw a German shepherd sitting by a cruiser. We held our breath until the red taillights faded behind us and the blue strobes were just aglow in the rearview mirror. "You're crazy," Emily breathed. She was fighting the steering wheel as the tires slipped in the mud. "I'm determined," I said. "Keep going. This road connects to the county highway in 3 miles. We reached the cabin at dawn. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun struggling to break through the storm clouds. The lake was gray and choppy. The cabin looked abandoned. It looked like a memory that had been left to rot. Vines grew over the porch rails. The windows were dark, eyes staring back at me. I didn't wait. I jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. The wet leaves soaked my socks. I ran to the tackle shed. It was a small wooden structure separate from the main house. The door was hanging off one hinge. I burst inside. The smell of gasoline, old oil, and dry rot filled my nose. I scanned the floor. I knew exactly which board it was. The third one from the workbench. I grabbed a rusted tire iron from the bench. Screech, crack. I pried the wood up. The nails groaned in protest. The darkness beneath the floorboards was thick with cobwebs. I reached in, ignoring the possibility of spiders or rats. My fingers brushed cold metal. I pulled it out. A steel lockbox. Heavy, covered in a decade of dust and mouse droppings. I opened it. The hinges were stiff. The papers were inside. Dry, crisp, safe. The bank statements. The emails Jason thought he had permanently deleted. The ledger of his sins. "We have him," I said. My voice broke. My hands were shaking, but not from age. From the terrible weight of what I was about to do to my own blood. As we turned to leave the shed, a flash of light swept across the wooden walls. Headlights. A black SUV pulled into the gravel driveway, blocking the Honda. The engine purred, a powerful V8. "Is it the police?" Emily asked, ducking down behind the workbench. I peered through the dusty, spiderwebbed window. "No," I whispered. A cold chill settled in my gut. "It's worse." The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was blonde, sharp-featured, and dressed in a beige trench coat that looked immaculate against the backdrop of the muddy woods. She wore heels that sank slightly into the dirt, but she didn't seem to care. It was Sarah, Jason's fiancée, the CFO of Omni Group's acquisition team. She walked up to the porch of the main cabin, holding a phone to her ear. "I'm at the cabin, Jason," she said. Her voice carried in the still morning air. "I'm checking if he left a backup here. You said he used to come here to think. If I find anything, I'll burn it." I looked at Emily. Her eyes were terrified. "Stay here," I whispered. "Don't move until I tell you." I stepped out of the shed. I held the tire iron in one hand, the metal box in the other. "Hello, Sarah." She spun around. She dropped the phone. Thud. Her hand went to her mouth, but then she lowered it. She composed herself instantly. She was a professional shark. She smiled. It was a razor-blade smile, cold and sharp. "Robert," she said. She looked me up and down, taking in the dirty scrubs, the mud, the exhaustion. "You look terrible. Gray is not your color." "Where is Jason?" I asked. I walked toward her. "He's at the office, prepping the champagne. He's very excited about the signing." She reached into her designer purse. Her movement was slow, deliberate. "You know, you really are stubborn, Robert. Jason just wanted the money. He wanted the easy way out. I told him he should have just smothered you with a pillow while you slept. It would have been kinder." She pulled out a small pistol, a chromine .38 snub-nose. It looked like a toy in her hand, but the bore was black and real. Click. She pulled the hammer back. "Sarah, don't," I said. I stopped walking. I held up my hands. The heavy box, weighing me down. "You don't want a murder charge. Financial fraud is one thing. This is life without parole." "I won't be charged," she said lightly. "Self-defense. The crazy escapee attacked me at his remote cabin. I feared for my life. It's a clean narrative. Drop it," a voice shouted from the side. Emily stepped out of the shed. She was shaking, but she was standing firm. She was holding a flare gun, an orange plastic safety device from the boat kit I kept on the shelf. She held it with two hands, aiming it at Sarah's chest. "A flare gun," Sarah laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You're joking. Go back to your hospital doctor. It contains a magnesium payload that burns at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit." Emily said. Her voice was steady, reciting the specs like an engineer. "If I pull this trigger, it will go through your coat, through your skin, and fuse your ribs together. I won't miss at this range." Sarah hesitated. She looked at the orange plastic gun. She looked at Emily's desperate eyes. She realized that Emily wasn't a criminal. She was a terrified woman with nothing left to lose, and that made her dangerous. "Go," I told Sarah. "Get in your car. Tell Jason I'm coming." Sarah glared at us. She calculated the odds. She lowered the pistol slowly. "It doesn't matter," she spat. "The deal happens in 2 hours. You look like a vagrant. You have no car that can outrun me. You'll never make it back to the city in time." She holstered the gun, turned on her heel, and got in her SUV. She reversed aggressively, tires spraying gravel, and sped off toward the highway. "We have to go," Emily said, her adrenaline crashing. She almost dropped the flare gun. "Not like this," I said. I looked down at my dirty, wet scrubs. She's right about one thing. I can't walk into a boardroom looking like a convict. They'll tackle me before I open my mouth. "We don't have time to shop, Robert. I have clothes here," I said, "in the closet." 10 minutes later, I walked out of the cabin. I had stripped off the scrubs. I was wearing clothes that had hung in the cedar closet for 15 years. A heavy tweed jacket that smelled of mothballs and wood smoke, a plaid flannel shirt, and because the moths had eaten my trousers, a pair of rubberized canvas fishing waders. I looked ridiculous. I looked like a confusing mix of an English professor and a deep-sea fisherman. "It's not Armani," I said, buttoning the jacket. I felt the stiffness of the fabric. It felt like armor. Emily smiled. It was a nervous, terrified smile, but it was real. "It's distinguished," she said. "It's memorable." I grabbed the metal box. "Let's go catch a shark," I said. 9 Sterling Infrastructure Headquarters. The building rose from the pavement like a shard of blue ice, piercing the gray morning sky. I had sketched the initial design for this tower on a napkin in a diner 20 years ago. I had supervised the pouring of the caissons, deep into the bedrock. I knew how the wind load caused the upper floors to sway just a fraction of an inch, a movement imperceptible to the occupants, but terrifying if you knew the physics. It looked impregnable. It looked like a monument to permanence. But I knew the truth. It was just glass and steel. And right now, it was housing a parasite. We walked into the lobby. The contrast was violent. The lobby was a temple of polished marble and hushed conversations, smelling of espresso and expensive HVAC filtration. And then there was us. I was a man in a moth-eaten tweed jacket, and rubberized fishing waders that squeaked with every step. I smelled of old lake water and fear. Emily looked like a refugee from a war zone, her white coat stained with mud, her hair wild. The security guard, old Tom, looked up from his console. Tom had been with me since the beginning. He was a former foreman who had blown out his back on the riverfront project. I had given him this desk job so he could keep his pension. He squinted, his hand hovering over the silent alarm button. Then his jaw dropped. The color drained from his face.
Mr. Sterling?
Tom stammered. He stood up, knocking over his coffee cup. Brown liquid spread across his paperwork. He looked at the waiters. He looked at the mud on my face. He looked at Emily, who was clutching the flare gun in her pocket like a talisman. "Good morning, Tom," I said. I didn't stop. I walked past the turnstiles, the rubber waiters making a wet slap squeak on the marble. I seemed to have forgotten my badge. "Sir?" Mr. Jason said. Tom stepped out from behind the desk. He was trembling. He put a hand on his radio. I stopped. I turned slowly to face him. I didn't look at him as a boss looks at an employee. I looked at him as one old man looks at another when the world has gone mad. "I know what he said, Tom. He told you I was sick. He told you I was dangerous." I took a step closer. "Look at me, Tom. You know me. You saw me climb the scaffolding on the Prudential job when the wind was howling at 40 knots. Do I look like I don't know who I am?" Tom hesitated. He looked at the radio, then back at my eyes. He saw the steel there. He saw the man who had paid for his back surgery. The conflict played out on his face. Fear of the young king versus loyalty to the old lion. Slowly, deliberately, he took his hand off the radio. He keyed a command into his console. "Elevator 4 is waiting, sir," he whispered. "It's the express. No stops." "Thank you, Tom," I said. "If the police come, I'm on a coffee break, sir," he said. I didn't see a thing. I stepped into the elevator. Emily followed, breathing shallow and fast. The doors slid shut, sealing us in a capsule of silence. I pressed the button for the 40th floor, the executive suite. The elevator began to rise. Whoosh. My stomach lurched, not from the speed, but from the gravity of what was coming. I was ascending to destroy my son. I was going up there to cut off my own limb to save the body. The numbers climbed on the digital display. 10, 20, 30. "Are you ready?" Emily asked. Her voice was small in the metal box. I adjusted the lapels of my tweed jacket. I looked at my reflection in the polished brass doors. I looked like a lunatic. "No," I said honestly, "but the concrete is already pouring. We can't stop it now." Ding. The doors opened onto the 40th floor foyer. The silence here was different. It was the silence of money. Thick carpet swallowed our footsteps. I could hear Jason's voice drifting through the double oak doors of the boardroom at the end of the hall. "A new era of prosperity," he was saying. His voice was smooth, practiced, lubricated by the confidence of a man who thinks he has won. "This merger is not just a sale. It is the culmination of my father's vision, a vision I am proud to carry forward." The lie hit me like a physical blow. A surge of anger, hot and white, flooded my chest, burning away the fatigue. I didn't knock. I didn't stop to compose myself. I marched to the doors. I was wearing waders meant for navigating treacherous currents, and that is exactly what I was doing. I kicked the doors open. Boom! The heavy oak slammed against the interior walls with a violence that shook the room. The scene froze. It was a tableau of corporate betrayal. 20 heads turned in unison. The board of directors, men and women I had handpicked, people I had invited to my home for Christmas. The Omni Group executives, sharks in sharkskin suits, smelling blood in the water. And Jason, he was standing at the head of the table, a crystal glass of water in his hand. He looked perfect, every hair in place, the golden boy. The contract lay before him, open to the signature page. His pen was hovering over the line. "Dad," he whispered. The word hung in the air, fragile and terrified. The pen slipped from his fingers. It rolled across the polished mahogany table. Clack, clack, clack sound loud in the deathly silence. Don't sign it, I said. My voice was gravel and iron. It wasn't a shout. It was a command from the bedrock. Security, Jason screamed. The mask slipped instantly. Panic cracked his voice, pitching it into a hysterical falsetto. He's escaped. He's dangerous. Someone call 911. Two board members stood up, their chairs scraping back. One was Arthur Pendleton, my old lawyer, my friend of 30 years. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His face was the color of whey. Sit down, gentlemen, I said. I walked into the room. Squeak, squeak. The sound of the rubber waiters was absurd, comical, and terrifying. I am not dangerous. I am angry, and there is a significant difference. He's mentally unfit. Jason yelled, backing away until he hit the credenza. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at him. Look at his clothes. If he thinks he's fishing, he's having an episode. I am fishing, I said. I hefted the rusted metal lockbox in my hand. It was heavy with the weight of truth. I threw it onto the polished mahogany table. Clang. The sound was violent. The box slid across the surface, scratching the expensive finish, and slammed to a halt right in front of the chairman of the board. And I just caught a shark. What is this? The chairman asked. He stared at the rusted box as if it were radioactive. Robert, what is the meaning of this? Roof, Emily said. She stepped out from behind me. She looked small in the room of giants, but she held her head high. I am Dr. Emily Grant. I was the attending physician at the Crestview facility. I treated Mr. Sterling. She took a breath, steadying herself. He is perfectly sane. The diagnosis was forged. The diagnosis, she continued, her voice gaining power, cutting through the murmurs, was purchased by Dr. Vance, who received a $500,000 wire transfer from a shell corporation controlled by Jason Sterling. Lies, Jason shouted. He was red in the face now, sweating profusely. She's crazy, too. She kidnapped him. She's a disgruntled employee. I reached into the box. My hand was steady. I pulled out the sheaf of papers. They smelled of Medu and victory. Here are the wire transfers. Jason, I said, tossing the first bundle onto the table. They fanned out like playing cards. Date and time stamped. Here is the email you sent to the bookie in Vegas. Big Tony, I believe, promising to pay him with the merger bonus. I turned my gaze to Arthur Pendleton. The lawyer was trembling, unable to meet my eyes. And here, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, is the email chain with my trusted counsel, Mr. Pendleton. Instructions on how to set up the offshore accounts to hide the embezzlement from the pension fund. Arthur closed his eyes. He sank into his chair, a deflated balloon. He knew it was over. The silence from his end was a confession. The Omni Group CEO, a man named Sterling, no relation, just irony, picked up the papers. He adjusted his rimless glasses. He read the top sheet, then the second. His face went white. He looked at Jason with a mixture of disgust and relief. Relief that he hadn't signed yet. He closed his leather briefcase with a decisive snap. We are withdrawing our offer, he said coldly. Effective immediately. Jason, the chairman said. He stood up. He was a man I had known since college. His voice was ice. What is this? Jason looked at the papers scattered like leaves. He looked at the executives standing up, distancing themselves from him, as if he were contagious. He looked at me. Dad, he whimpered. The arrogance was gone. The CEO was gone. The suit was just a costume now. Just a frightened boy remained, a boy who had tried to play a man's game and had been crushed by the rules. Dad, please, I can explain. I did it for the family. I did it to save the stock price. No, I said, you did it for yourself. I walked closer to him. The smell of his fear was palpable, sour sweat and expensive cologne. You forgot the first rule of this family, Jason. The rule I wrote on the first beam of the first building I ever built. I leaned in, my face inches from his. We build. We don't steal. We bear the load. We don't shift it. I can fix it, Jason pleaded. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the tweed jacket. Dad, don't let them take me. I'm your son. I'm your only son. This was the moment, the last chance. I looked at him. I saw the fear. I saw the eyes of the toddler who used to run to me when it thundered. I felt the biological imperative to protect him, to pull out my checkbook, to bribe the world to go away. A part of me, the father part, screamed to cover for him, to say it was a misunderstanding, to take the fall myself, that I was a builder. And I knew that if you build on a rotten foundation, the collapse doesn't just kill you, it kills everyone inside. To save him would be to destroy him. To let him think there are no consequences would be the ultimate failure of fatherhood. I can't fix this for you, Jason, I said softly. My voice cracked. I pulled my arm away from his grip. It felt like tearing my own skin. You broke it. You have to live in the rubble. The elevator dinged behind us, the heavy tread of boots on carpet. The police arrived. Old Tom had called them, but he hadn't called them for me. Jason Sterling, the officer asked. He was holding a pair of handcuffs. Jason slumped into his chair. He looked small. He looked broken. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion. I'm sorry, Dad, he sobbed as the officer pulled him up and cuffed his hands behind his back. The click of the ratchet was the loudest sound in the world. I know, I said. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging. I watched them drag him out. He looked back at me one last time. A look of terror and betrayal that I knew would haunt my nightmares until the day I died. Goodbye, son. The room was silent. The board members were staring at the floor, at the table, anywhere but at me. Mr. Sterling, the chairman said quietly. He looked ashamed. We didn't know. We thought. You should have looked closer, I said. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I picked up the unsigned contract from the table. I ripped it in half, then in quarters. The meeting is adjourned, I said, and get out of my chair. 6 months later, the state penitentiary was a sprawling scar of concrete and razor wire cut into the arid landscape of the valley. It was a place designed to crush the spirit through geometry, hard angles, endless corridors, and the complete absence of color. I sat in the visiting room on a bolted-down metal stool. My back ached. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. It was the same smell as the psychiatric ward where I had been held, just sharper, more permanent. Between me and the empty chair on the other side was a sheet of scratched, bulletproof plexiglass. It was 2 inches thick. It distorted the world, making everything on the other side look like a smudge. A ghost. I waited. I checked my watch. A cheap Tumex now. I hadn't worn the Omega since that day. It felt too heavy. The door on the far side buzzed. A heavy, magnetic clack. Jason walked in. He shuffled. His ankles were shackled, the chain dragging on the linoleum. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He sat down. He didn't look up immediately. He looked at his hands, which were clasped together on the metal shelf. He looked older. The soft, pampered edges of his face had been whittled away by stress and bad food. His hair, once styled with $50 gel, was buzzed short, revealing the shape of his skull. He looked like a stranger. "Hello, Jason," I said. My voice was amplified by the small, tinny speaker in the glass partition. "Dad," he said. He looked up. His eyes were dull. The spark of arrogance, the fire of ambition, it was all gone. Extinguished. "How are you?" I asked. The question felt absurd. "Surviving," he said. A dry, humorless chuckle. "The library is okay. I read a lot. I'm learning about things I should have known." "Like what?" "Fuzz. Like consequences," he said softly. "And leverage, not the financial kind." He shifted in his seat. "How's the company?" he asked. There was a hunger in his voice, but it wasn't greed anymore. It was nostalgia. It was a man asking about a home that had burned down. "Strong," I said. "The stock is up 15%. We didn't sell. We doubled down on the municipal contracts." I paused, watching his reaction closely. "I promoted Emily," I said. "She's the director of corporate responsibility now. She sits on the board." Jason nodded slowly. I expected anger. I expected the old jealousy to flare up. But he just sighed. A faint ghost of a smile touched his chapped lips. "She's smart," he said. "She was the only one who saw through me. Her and you, she has integrity." I corrected him gently. "She builds things to last. That's something we need more of, something we lost for a while." "Yeah," Jason whispered. "We did." We sat in silence for a long moment. The hum of the fluorescent lights was deafening. Around us, other families were crying, arguing, touching hands against the glass. The air hummed with things unsaid. With the weight of the years I had spent working instead of parenting. With the weight of his entitlement. "Do you hate me?" Jason asked. Finally, he looked me dead in the eye for the first time. I looked at my son. I saw the toddler who fell off his bike. I saw the teenager who graduated valedictorian. I saw the man who tried to drug me and lock me away. "I could never hate you," I said. The truth of it caught in my throat. "You're my blood. You're the only thing left of your mother." I leaned forward, my forehead almost touching the cold plastic. "But I can't trust you, Jason. And in my world, in our world, trust is the rebar. Without it, the concrete is just dust waiting to crumble. We can't build anything together anymore." Jason flinched. The verdict hit him harder than the judge's gavel had. "I dream about the house," he said softly, his voice trembling. "About the rain that night. I dreamed that I didn't send the text. I dreamed that I just told you the truth." "We all have regrets," I said. "I dreamed that I came home earlier on Tuesday. I dreamed I didn't miss your baseball games to pour concrete." "It wouldn't have mattered," Jason said. "I was broken a long time ago. I wanted to be you, Dad. But I didn't want to do the work." The guard behind him tapped his watch. 2 minutes, Sterling." Jason stood up. The chains rattled. "Dad," I stopped him before he turned away. "Yes? Will you come back? Next month?" I looked at the concrete walls, the steel bars, the cage. I thought about the prison he had put me in. The smell of the oatmeal, the feeling of the needle. I looked at his face, desperate, lonely, seeking a tether to the world he had forfeited. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." Jason nodded. He understood. It was an honest answer. "Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, son." I walked out of the prison. The transition was jarring. From the cool, recirculated air of the facility to the blast of heat from the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of bruised purple and violent orange. I took a deep breath. It tasted of dust and sagebrush and diesel, but mostly it tasted of autonomy. I was free. I walked to the car. Not a limousine. I had sold the limo. A sturdy, black pickup truck. A newer model of the one I started the business with. Emily was waiting in the passenger seat. She was reviewing blueprints, a hard hat resting on her knees. She looked up as I opened the door. She saw the heaviness in my shoulders. She didn't ask for details. She knew. "How was he?" she asked quietly. "He's learning," I said. I climbed into the driver's seat. He's starting from the bottom, excavation phase, digging through the dirt to find bedrock. I started the engine. The truck hummed to life, a solid mechanical sound. He asked if I'd come back. I added, "And?" I told him the truth, that I didn't know. Emily nodded. She rolled up the blueprints. "Where to, boss?" she asked. "Home? It's been a long day." I looked at the road ahead. The highway stretched out, leading back to the city. Back to the skyline I had helped shape. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a content one. "No," I said, "to the site, the riverfront project. At this hour, the crew is gone." "The concrete is curing," I said. "I want to check the temperature sensors. We have a foundation to pour tomorrow." I drove away. I pulled onto the highway. The prison receded in the distance, a gray smudge against the darkening hills. I resisted the urge to look at it in the mirror. I adjusted the urge to look at it in the mirror. I adjusted the rearview mirror. I tilted it up just enough so I couldn't see the road behind me. "The rearview mirror is for checking what's behind you," I murmured, more to myself than to Emily. "Just to make sure it isn't gaining on you." I looked through the windshield. The city lights were twinkling in the distance, a grid of promise and structure. "The windshield is for seeing where you're going." I shifted gears. The truck accelerated. I had scars. I had lost my son. I had lost my innocence about the nature of family. But the foundation held. The structure was sound, and I had a lot of building left to do. Every structure needs a witness, just as every story needs a listener. If you felt the weight of the blueprint and the strength of the foundation in Robert's journey, leave a like to mark your presence here. Subscribe to join us as we continue to build stories that stand the test of time, because the strongest walls are the ones we build together.